Well, welcome back to another episode of Parker's Pensies. This is a podcast where we explore thoughts in philosophy, theology, nature, and life. I love thinking about cool stuff, so come think with me. A big shout out to my supporters on Patreon and the Anchor app. And there's a couple other different supporters who have bought coffee mugs and stuff like that. You can find all that in the description. If you like this podcast, go ahead and support it. Yeah, that would be awesome. I could pay for some food and stuff. It'd be fantastic. But today we have another podcast in the life category. And so I have a special guest with me, Jared Kassebaum, and we're going to be talking about stand-up comedy. So Jared's a stand-up comic, and which means all the pressure is on him to make everyone laugh, which I would never do to myself, but for some reason he's chosen. So without further ado, hey man, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
No, I'm psyched to be here. It's super fun. What pressure you built me up to?
Well, dude, so this is something I wanted to ask you, but let's just jump in. Like, you are a stand-up comic, and so that's what you've chosen. That's what you want to do. That's your profession, your main profession, at least, that you aspire to, right? You want to do that full time. You're not doing that full time yet, are you?
Well, before the pandemic hit, I was pretty close
Okay.
to it being full time. I had a part-time job that provided that last little bit. But I was traveling a lot and taking a lot of time off and hitting the road a lot. So
Yeah.
there were weeks where it felt full time, and then there were a lot of weeks where it didn't. But then in the pandemic, it's just been so stale that at this point, just doing whatever I can.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, just for everyone's business, but stand-up comics, like, I could definitely see that. So what I mean is, like, you go to a party or something, and you're not doing a ton of that right now because of the pandemic, but you go somewhere, like, oh, what do you do, Jared? And you're like, oh, I'm a stand-up comic. Like, well, make me laugh, funny guy.
Yeah, every time. Yeah, absolutely every time. And it can be exhausting for sure, because sometimes you're in the mood. I think if I'm like at a party or like something where my extroversion can really come out, I'll eat that up and I'll go for it. But there are definitely times where that can be really annoying, where it's like, oh, I didn't expect that here, like at church or something, where it's like, oh, you're a comedian, make me laugh. And I'm like, that's not why I'm here. We're not doing that right now.
Yeah, totally. Well, so I always wondered about if comedians have like different jokes for different situations. So like if someone says make me laugh, do you have one when you are feeling it that you're like, all right, this kills with new audience? Like, do you have one in mind that you go with?
Yeah, I mean, if people want to hear like a stage joke, like a joke I would actually do on stage, I definitely have a few one-liners that fit that scenario that I can whip out that are definitely fun to do on stage. If I'm doing, I don't know, hopefully over the course of a party, I'd be funny at some point naturally. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I always wondered if there's like a snarky one where when you weren't feeling it and you're like, all right, well, for instance, like if we're on stage, I would say how big your nose is or something like that. And like just to get them to go away.
Well, I think sometimes it's fun. It is kind of fun to be a little snarky and throw it back and just kind of mock them a little bit.
Yeah.
Be like, "Oh, make me laugh!" Like that's just not. It's just not a. It's not a good thing. I don't walk up to an accountant and be like, "Crunch some numbers for me." You know, you don't do that.
Man.
So I think it's easy to just throw that back in their face. It's like we're all just having a good time at this party or whatever we're at.
That's such a good point, though, too. Like you actually don't crunch some numbers for me, bro. Like, let's go. When I'm done here, let's see your stuff. Yeah, that's hilarious.
No, for sure.
Well, so man, how'd you get into comedy? Like, how'd you even get on this track where you wanted to be a stand-up comic?
I mean, it's been a long road, obviously, right? So I'm in my mid-20s, and I didn't really discover that as a passion by any means until I was in college. I went to Purdue in Indiana originally as a physics major. And so that was actually going to be my career for a while. Like my whole high school, I thought I was going to like pursue a PhD in physics. My dad has a PhD in chemistry, and I just like never considered anything other than the sciences.
Yeah.
Until college, and a few things happened. The first one being I was surrounded by a lot of people smarter than me. For honestly, especially in the realm of physics, in high school, it was like me and a couple friends. We were like the physics guys.
Yeah.
And then you finally get to a big school, and you're like, oh, there's like hundreds of people better than me. And that was actually kind of freeing. And then the second thing too was I actually had a really close friend pass my freshman year of college. And then that was the first kind of emotional thing that made me, for the first time ever, start to look elsewhere. And I was like, okay, what am I actually passionate about? And I realized, like, man, like Colbert's my idol. And, you know, all I wanted to do was tell jokes and actually have like an emotional impact on people. And I felt like I looked around at all my physics professors and I was just like, man, I don't want that life. And so I just started looking around and started signing up for a couple open mics kind of on a whim. this summer between my freshman and sophomore years of school, and started doing open mics and ate some trash at first, and then went up from there and just kept going, and then it's been a fun road.
Dude, that sounds so terrifying to me. So like some people think I'm decently funny at a party or whatever, and so I like that. And if I were to go up on an open mic, that would all be taken from me. I wouldn't be the funny guy anymore because it'd be just destroyed. What made you like? What gave you the confidence or the courage, or whatever, to get up there and be like, I'm gonna try this out?
I mean, you've got to have an element of like you got nothing to lose, right?
Mm.
I think if you go up there with something to prove, especially the first few times, you're gonna bomb, and it's gonna hurt emotionally more than it should.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's enough that they'll never do it again. I think for me, the one laugh I got, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Ah,
So you get hooked on the few laughs you do get. But I think what to your point, I mean, that's so true. I heard a Sinbad quote that really has inspired me from the beginning, where Sinbad, the comedian, he said one time, he was like, everybody's funny in their living room. The
right.
secret is making the stage your living room. And
Yeah.
I think that mentality has been inspiring to me, and I think he's, bar none, the best at that, where he can take any situation and just riff in a way that a friend could to a friend in a living room, but he can just do it so fluidly. So that, yeah, you just gotta do it once and see. Anybody that I've ever talked to that's like, oh, I'm kind of interested in that, I've always just been like, do it at least once,
Hmm.
and then figure out when are you more terrified of the silence, or are you more energized by like the one or two laughs you do get.
Yeah.
And those are the two you got to figure out, and you got to weigh it. You got to say, is it worth powering through many more nights of silence for those few laughs?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then keep going.
Yeah. Man, that's good. That's like the half full, half empty kind of perspective shift, and which one are you valuing there? That's good, man. I like what you said too, quoting Sinbad, like making the stage your living room. There's like, it seems like there's different. I wanted to get into the kind of philosophy side of comedy, right?
Sure.
You'd mentioned that earlier, but off air. But there's like that where you're letting anyone in on you're making the whole place comfortable. Hey, we can all kind of laugh at this. And it seems like there's other ways where it's like, hey, we're gonna shred some people in the audience, and I'm gonna be
Yeah.
like the smart one, and I'm gonna wreck everyone else. And that's kind of funny too. Are there different like categories of comedians that you can have in your mind that's like, this guy's kind of a jerk, that's what he does. This one makes fun of himself, self-deprecating. Are there different categories that people fall into, or is it like a mixed bag?
No, for sure. There's definitely categories. I mean, they're all overlap at times, but I think
Okay.
at least in LA and Chicago, which are the two scenes, and Indianapolis a little bit, but Indianapolis is small enough that everybody's kind of in one scene. But in Chicago and LA, which are the two scenes I've been in, it's big enough that there is kind of like a mainstream and an alt at the same time. And
Okay.
so I think in LA you have like the Comedy Store kind of is that mainstream vibe, where it is kind of that like, I don't care about what people think, and I'm gonna go out of my way for the next 20 minutes to prove that I don't care what people think.
Yeah.
And that is kind of their whole MO. And I think some of those guys are hilarious. It's definitely not my style, but some of those guys are hilarious. I mean, I think Bill Burr is kind of the most
Sure. I was thinking Bill
famous
Burr
in
for
that
sure.
in that camp, and I think he's hilarious. And like his irreverence is incredibly fun to watch.
Yeah.
That's definitely not how my mind goes when I'm on stage, but it's a fun vibe for sure. And then I would say alt is more the people that are trying to be clever. I guess that's where I more fall in, is like, I would rather be known for a good punchline than for like poning a heckler or
Yeah.
something. Although poning a heckler can be fun too.
Yeah.
Every now and then you get those where you just got to go, okay, I got to shut this guy down. And that it can be a fun time. And then some people have made their whole brand. Like there's a few comics that just like post heckler videos on
Yeah.
YouTube, and that's pretty much how they've blown up, you know?
Yeah.
So there's different philosophies behind it for sure. I definitely am more, I don't know if you know, like Pete Holmes, John Mulaney,
Yeah.
I think Gary Goldman, he's gotten a lot bigger in the last few years, but those are people that I look up to a lot in the realm of like, okay, yeah, I want an interesting premise, and I might be motivated by some frustration like the other guys, but at the end of the day, I really want to make sure I have like a good punchline. So
Yeah. 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 That's helped me a lot. Yeah. That categorization. There's like, I think all of it's creative, right? But there's like, it reminds me of what, like Community, where it's like just raw. This isn't stand up, whatever, but just raw, like pure, unadulterated creativity. Just
Hmm.
that's what it is. And then there's other ones. I don't like The Office would be like shredding people, where it's like, look at how dumb Dwight is. Look at how stupid this is. Like really funny. Yeah, and there's that's how I'm thinking through at least. What What do you think about? Well, I don't know, man. Are you cool if I ask you about some comedians and just kind of get
Oh
your
yeah,
take?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, unless I
When
know him personally, I'll tell you what I think.
Sure, sure. So like, I like Joe Rogan. I like listening to his podcast. I think he's pretty funny on there sometimes and stuff. I don't really like his stand up. Um, what
Totally agree.
how do you characterize like, his stand up? What does he do?
I mean, I would put him closer to the Bill Burr side of the
Okay.
spectrum, I would say. But I haven't watched all of his stand up, and I think his podcast, I think he can be funny for sure. I haven't listened to all of his podcasts, but I definitely feel like, I even on some level feel like his categorization as a comedian doesn't necessarily hold a lot of water. Yes, he's done stand up for sure,
Yeah.
but I mean, that's not. I don't know, because I even think it's become almost a funny trope in my life. People will be like, "Oh, you're a comedian. I love Joe Rogan," and I'm
Yes.
like, "Okay, we're not really on the same page there then," because you love him for his podcast, which is
Right.
an all right thing, but that's not really. I wouldn't
Yeah.
even really put his podcast in the realm of comedy,
Right. Or his commentating on the UFC. And even then,
for sure.
he's not making a lot of jokes. He's a really good commentator. And so you listen to his take. Yeah, and that's kind of funny. He's kind of become more famous in those other areas or the old school TV show. And then those have kind of enveloped around his stand-up comedy. And he's got this fan base who's going to listen to him no matter what.
For
Except for
sure,
me.
for sure.
I'd really just I've tried to like it. I've really wanted to like his stand-up. It doesn't do it for me. But
And I think if you can have a career and you can, I mean, there's no artistic career that's right,
uh,
right? And I think
mm,
that's easy. I think there are definitely some comedian purists that because he's a big podcaster now don't like him because he doesn't just do stand up or
sure.
something like that,
Sure.
right? And I think that's stupid, right? We're
Yeah.
all any artist or any person trying to make a living writing or performing. There's no right way to do it. You got to figure out your own way. And if Rogan figured out that that's what he's better at, then great. Uh, so yeah, but
Yeah.
as far as his stand up goes, yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah. So like Dave Chappelle, seems like he used to be the more creative side we're talking about, and now he's kind of, well, at least in his last special, I think, was like more on the Bill Burr side, and did probably Bill Burr better than Bill Burr does Bill Burr. Uh, what do you make of Chappelle?
Yeah, I've watched most of his Netflix specials. I think there might have been one that I missed, but I love Chappelle. I think he does it well. Where I feel like he often he does the like the funny premise and the provocative premise, right?
Yeah.
Because to me that is the biggest difference. Is like I feel like Bill Burr or Louis back when he was more in the limelight, it was always like, what's the most provocative premise I can come up with,
Yeah.
and see how far I can run this into the ground before I lose the crowd is kind
Yeah.
of what sometimes it feels like. And I think Chappelle still finds a pretty provocative premise nine
Yeah.
times out of 10, but he also has punchlines. And I think Bill Burr does have punchlines sometimes too, but you can tell that Chappelle, for the most part, has also like tried really hard to figure out, what's a clever way to end it.
Mm,
And that to me is what sets him apart as one of the like greater comedians in that realm, because not only is it provocative premise, it also is like a really clever punchline.
yeah.
And I feel like a lot of comedians do one or the other, and there's a lot of comedians that go the premise route that just like come up with like, how can I shock the crowd, maybe be a little clever, but then they just kind of let the joke die without like giving it a button, as is
Yeah.
often the term, or
Yeah.
like a tag. And if you can, to me, a tag, that's good writing. And that's more where I would want to aspire to be like, like that felt like it concluded and it felt like you fulfilled the joke. And I think Chappelle does that really, really well.
Yeah.
For the most part, for the most part.
Yeah. So when I think of like tags and buttons, I think of like Mitch Hedberg. You're familiar with?
Oh yeah, I love Mitch.
He seems like he was all tagline, all button, right? Like it's
Yeah,
just
I
saying
loved
something
it.
great. Yeah, he was really funny. Dimitri Martin might be like that. He was so weird, but he would say some really funny stuff. Is he still around? Do you still listen to him at
Yeah,
all?
Martin's around. I don't think he's put out anything in a minute, but I actually one time like saw him at a bar in LA the year before everything shut down. So I know he's
Wow.
still doing stuff. He
Okay.
he shows up with a notebook. He's I've never seen a professional comedian be so upfront about the fact he's trying out new jokes, because he
Yeah.
just walked up with this like big 3-ring binder and like opened it up and was in just like essentially read punchlines, and then like would listen for the laughter, make a little note, and then move on to the next one.
Dang.
Uh, so, but everybody was just psyched he was there. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. So dude, like when I get into something, I definitely have very, very hipstery tendencies. Like, I mean, I have a handlebar mustache or whatever, but when I get into something, I'm like, I want to know everything about it. And then I get kind of jaded about like the popular people, because you see behind the scenes, you see how they treat people, or you see like, oh, this dude's actually much better. So like you get into folk music and you're like, Mumford and Sons is awesome. But then you're like, but there's all these little bands that you guys don't even know about who are way
yeah,
better. I wouldn't say that about Mumford because I love Mumford, but you could say something like that. Has that been your experience as you get into comedy, or are the big guys still the funniest?
I think there are definitely like those entry points, like you kind of say with music for sure, where
Mhm.
it's like a lot of people I think get into John Mulaney, and then they follow that into like the weirder versions of him,
Yeah.
right? And I think that there's definitely that out there. I think I obviously have a unique perspective just being in LA. I can see free shows. I mean, pre-pandemic, I could see free shows with big names, all the time. And so I would definitely say that that's helped, because not everybody has a special, and I think there are people out there
Yeah.
that are incredibly funny that just don't have the medium to present that yet, and so that's hard too.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's definitely entry points, and I think that like there's definitely like, oh, if you like John Mulaney, you should check out Gary Goldman. Like I would definitely say that like that's kind of the next step in
Okay.
that line. And then there's definitely people weirder than that, but then it gets more and more niche and a smaller and smaller audience. And then living in the age of the internet, that can be beautiful, but also terrifying. Um, yeah, to
Yeah.
have so many options.
Yeah. Well, shoot, there's so many questions I want to ask. Okay, so Chicago, we have like, is Second City here? Is that's Chicago?
Yeah,
Yeah. But is that's like improv and stuff, right?
yeah.
So help me out. Like, why would you go to LA for comedy? And is there a good stand-up comedy scene in Chicago, or is it like an improv scene? Like, can you help me navigate through that?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I do improv too.
Okay.
And I've done a lot in LA. I didn't really do much before moving out to LA. And at first, for me, that started as just like a separate skill I wanted to get better at. But then before the pandemic, I was performing improv also probably 2 or 3 times a week, along with
Okay.
2 or 3 stand-up shows a week before the pandemic hit. But yeah, it's so in Chicago, you've got Second City, and you've got IO.
Mhm.
And some of these are starting to close, which is really tough because of the pandemic. So, like in LA, the biggest improv theater is called UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade, which was founded by Amy Poehler and a couple of her friends
Oh
that
wow.
are less famous than her, but are also like in TV back in the day. But like they used to have 2 locations in LA, and as of the week before Christmas, one of those just shut down because they nothing's happening there. They can't support it anymore. But they still have one of their theaters. Both of their locations in New York just shut down. So that whole
Wow.
landscape is being completely changed because of the pandemic. There are so many small improv theaters around LA and Chicago that are barely making it, if not making it at all.
Mhm.
There's one in LA that I used to perform at, and it's just so fun, just called the Improv Space. And it was just a fun little independent theater, barely, surviving. And it's a fun, but yeah, at least in LA, and it feels like Chicago too, the stand up and improv scenes are a little bit separated. There
Okay.
are definitely some people that do both. And that was one thing I had tried really hard to be in LA, was somebody who could do both. And they generally have different vibes. I think in the stand up world in Chicago and in LA, from what I've experienced, was significantly more the like people who don't like life and want to kind of make that funny.
Yeah.
And then improv is more the people who see everything through this really goofy light and just want to be on stage because it's fun.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that those are more the vibes. And I think I definitely fit the improv like that's definitely more how I want to look at the world, is
Mhm.
through that, like, let's just all have a goofy fun time together and let's do it on stage. And if I can get like three people that are really funny at the same time, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah.
And that's more the improv vibe, I would say. They're definitely the punk rock mentality within the improv world for sure. Um, and I've been to multiple punk rock concerts in LA and seen improv friends on accident. So
Oh, nice.
that's happened for sure. I think within stand up though, it's definitely more the people that are like, I hate my hometown and I'm moving to LA or Chicago to get away from that, and I'm doing stand up. Not to just throw them all under the bus, but I've met a lot of people that give me that vibe. In Chicago, yeah, you have Second City and IO, which is the big one. That's like more kind of like the granddad of improv. But I can't remember right now. I remember there being some news with them with the pandemic. You move to LA or New York though if you want to get into TV. I mean that's pretty much what it is.
Okay.
Chicago's a slightly smaller scene, and it's got just as much stand up on some level, but you just don't have those last little connections. So at least
Okay.
when I moved to LA, it was with the mindset of like, I'm not by any means the top of the Chicago scene, not even close, not even the top of Indiana. But I was young enough that I was like, I love to put down roots. I love to invest in community. I might as well do that in the place where I want to end up. And that was just kind of my thinking. In LA, yeah, I mean, there's way more casting directors and agents, floating around the city than in Chicago. And you might get discovered in a lot of, SNL people have come out of Chicago in the last couple of decades, or Hannibal Buress is from Chicago, moved to LA, moved back to Chicago. Like that was kind of famous when he moved back to Chicago. So it's got a big scene for sure.
Yeah.
It just depends on what you want out of it.
Yeah. Well, so like long term for you, man, like are you wanting to go on TV? Are you happy if you have like a successful stand-up career or either one, or is one kind of like the end goal?
No, I mean, stand up, I think, is the most joyful thing in and of itself.
Okay.
Like when I'm on stage, you just feel more alive than like, and you ride the energy of the crowd, like all of that. It's like a good stand up show is just the most fun way to spend an evening.
Yeah.
I think that, but from like a long term perspective, it's really tough to be a full time comedian unless you're always on the road, unless you go into TV. And
Mm.
so I think that's always kind of the super long term goal, where it's like I loved the road life. I wasn't like on the road constantly, but on the road every now and then. Before the pandemic, I loved that version of life. But also, if I have a family and kids someday, I don't want to be out doing that all the time.
Right.
And so in LA, it feels like there's so many comedians that I respect that are beyond me in career, but they maybe only hit the road 2 or 3 months out of the year because they're writing for a TV show the other 9 months or something like that. And so it gives you the ability to like call LA home in a legitimate way,
Yeah.
and hopefully raise a family, or hopefully, invest in other parts of the community in a way that actually has like roots, rather than like there are full-time comedians that live in Indiana, and I know them, but they're pre-pandemic, they were pretty much constantly on the road
Okay.
because you have to be driving all around the Midwest or the South or whatever, going to all these comedy clubs, making enough to get to the next town and still pay your rent back home in Indiana or whatever. And that exists. But at the end of the day, unless you're in a very rare case, you're not going to be able to really move beyond that unless you move.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, dude, one thing I'm thinking about when it comes, so if you were to become a writer on a show, that would make sense. But man, there's I see like these comedians who I think are hilarious, and then you see them, they end up acting in a show, and you're like, you're not that funny anymore because you're kind of pigeonholed, or you have to appeal to a broader audience. I feel like the broader audience thing just kills creativity, and like as a good millennial myself, I'm like, well, let's be authentic. And I see in some of my friends who write copy, and it's like, bro, you're so creative, you're so funny, and the stuff you write is trash. And he's like, well, yeah, but I got to write for the moms, the middle-aged moms. Like I have to make them laugh too. It's not just you,
Yeah,
dude, with your handlebar mustache. What are your thoughts on like you need money, you need a job, but you also want to be true to yourself, kind of thing? Have you considered like is it selling out when you go onto a show or when you go into a commercial? What are your thoughts on that? Because I know you thought about that before.
for sure. I mean, I don't think it's selling out. I think it's people are going to pay you for the slice of your creativity that you're giving them.
Mm-hmm.
And right, or like I have a commercial agent, and that's really frustrating to audition sometimes when that kind of millennial vibe, or like Enneagram 4 in me, or
Yeah.
whatever, however you want to put it, comes out, where I'm like, oh, like I was told by my commercial agent, if you don't have like a headshot wearing a flannel, you're probably not going to get a job where the casting director wants you to wear a flannel. Right? It's like that specific and stupid, honestly.
Wow.
But at the same time, there's 200 submissions, so they're not gonna imagine you in a flannel.
Yeah.
So it's like you've got to give them what they want. And I think with writing or copy, it's a similar thing where you're only being paid not for your totality, as sad as that is. You're being paid for the element of creativity that you can deliver that fits their market segment, even to use that kind of marketing language. And I think uh, if you have the ability to be a comedian with your audience, and they love you for you, and you can go all in on that, and things like Patreon and Twitch are allowing that more and more,
Mhm.
go for it. And I honestly, that would be, I guess, the highest goal, to be fully fan supported in that sense. But that's also so tough. And there are people that are making that happen, but that, to me, that's a different level of kind of artist patronage that is incredibly tough to reach. But also, writing for a TV show gives you more reach, or writing
Mhm.
copy at an ad agency or whatnot. You do get a different element and a different reach out of it. So, um, yeah, I go back and forth, because even in my pandemic life, I've gone back and forth of like, should I just use my savings and create as much internet content as I can to
Mhm.
pursue that version, or do I need to start looking for another job? And I've gone back and forth on that, every other month practically throughout the whole pandemic. Is like, no, I'm just gonna make a lot of content, and then the next month I'm like, crap, I need a job, and then so I go back and forth, and then it's like, what is selling out? I don't know. I think as long as you're still doing your thing, and Gary Goldman talks about this a lot, and I've heard it elsewhere too, but this idea of like, you really just need like, a few thousand fans that really like you.
Mhm.
And if you can get a few thousand fans that like truly love you, then you can make a living off of that, depending on where you live, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it's like, pursuing that would kind of be the ideal. But I don't know. Me and Ray and Chewbacca, we just sometimes chill in my room and sulk about the fact that I can't perform anymore. So,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
goes back and forth.
Yeah, I hear you, man. So does it uh okay. Does it do you ever have to reach that broader audience, like during your stand up, when you go out and you're like, do you ever have this thought, I want to say this joke. I don't think it'll work as well, but I think it's hilarious. A couple of my friends think it's hilarious. This other joke, I don't think is as funny, but I know it'll get a response. And so you say that broader joke. Do you ever do that?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, you got to read the room. I think, yeah, and like there are some, I'd be considered fairly alt, right?
Okay.
I do one-liners, I do impressions, but like not real impressions. They're like joke impressions, but
Yeah.
they work just enough, right? That type of stuff. And so I'd be considered pretty alt. There are some rooms in LA though that I'm too mainstream, because they're so alt. And those are usually more like theater people, or like improv people doing characters. And I've had to like go into those spaces, and I'm like, oh, they're not even going to like my weird stuff, because they're weirder than my weird stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you have to even somehow figure out how to get even more weird. Or when you leave LA, when I've done shows in Texas or New Mexico, or Arizona, or all around, you realize like, oh, unless you have a very lucky audience, and like figure out who the organizer is, and you really know that like you're going to hit your audience. If you're doing like a club in Texas, those are people that my weird stuff I have to like build to.
Hmm.
I can't just like come out the gate with that, right? And so I
Yeah.
have to somehow lay my first 5 minutes down as like, hey, I'm just like you, but also a little weird. But
Mhm.
then by 10 minutes in, I'm like, guys, the secret's out. I actually love being really weird, right? And you have to kind of like, it's a journey you get to take with them. But if you come out the gate way too weird, they're not going to like it.
Yeah.
Even though in some rooms in LA, if you come out the gate too normal, they're not going to like you.
Yeah.
So you do have to just judge it by audience. And there are definitely times where I've been like, this isn't working. Gotta just scrap the weird stuff and go fall back on some of my like more like stories, because I have some, 2 to 4 minute stories that I tell that are funny, that are definitely more like what a mom and dad in the Midwest are gonna want,
Hmm.
versus like, I don't know, my impression of a scared hot dog or whatever. So
Do you have that on hand? That
yeah, that's
impression?
my favorite joke, honestly. I just say, this is my impression of a really scared hot dog, and I just go, a contest? And so it's just a hot dog scared of a hot dog eating contest. That's
Yeah.
the whole joke, and it's one of my favorite
Uh,
jokes. But it doesn't work unless you kind of build to that weirdness.
yeah.
But even in some places, that's too weird still, right?
Okay.
I got really lucky. I did a show right before the pandemic hit in January last year in Amarillo, Texas, and honestly didn't even know Amarillo existed till I did this show. But I was expecting like a very classic Texan crowd.
Yeah.
The room I was in was a young person. You could tell it was like the punk room of the city, and I
Okay.
didn't know that going in, but I was psyched because I don't know, my best show of my life, and doing like that joke or other jokes in that vein were just crushing. So it was just, you just have a good time, and there's definitely an element where sometimes you stick to your guns because you're like, yeah, I want to maintain who I think
Okay.
I am in the
Okay.
midst of Dallas or in the midst of Indiana. But at the same time, if I can, I'd rather get two people to like the true me than not be me. But you do kind of have to. There's compromise, and you give and take.
Yeah. Dude, I catch that because of the podcast. I have such weird interests and I'm like really in on the ones that I like. And people have told me like, hey, if you want a bigger audience, you need to go more general. You need your voice is kind of high. You need to talk more like this and you need to be an announcer. And I'm like, that would destroy me inside though. I would hate it. I
Yeah,
wouldn't want to do
totally.
it. So for me, I'm like, I'm putting this out, and if anyone likes it, come on, let's go. You're in for the full thing then. Because I don't know, man. I'm like a younger millennial, right? I have some friends who are older millennials who give me advice, and they're like, "We're gonna talk like this. Welcome back to the show." And for me, I'm like, that's been done a billion times. I'm gonna throw up if you make me do that.
Well, and it's been done a billion times, and so to the older generation, usually that provides comfort
Yeah,
because they've heard it a billion times. That's what they
yeah,
want.
yeah,
Versus you and me, we don't want that. But what you're doing, and what hopefully I'm doing, and a lot of people our age, we're playing hopefully the long game,
yeah.
right? Where you put this out consistently, and each episode you get one more person listening.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, you're gonna love yourself more and have a big audience,
Yeah,
even if in the short term you don't have a big audience.
yeah,
And I think that's something everybody's got to struggle with. And then, of course, if you're relying on your art or this or whatever to be your financial
right.
situation, then you can't do that.
Yeah,
And then you've got to do the welcome back. It's so good to have you here.
yeah,
You've got to do that. But if you're doing it, yeah, I mean, there's just,
yeah, dude. That's a
if you can
huge
pay your
part of it.
bills, then pay your bills and do you.
Yeah, yeah. Man, that's another part of it too. There's like the practical side of it where, yeah, I need money. That's something I wanted to follow back up on. In your head, so I'm sure it changes and stuff like that, but in a room, you said you'd rather have like two people laughing at the real you, but also, are you more interested in telling the joke that you thought was creative and good, or getting a laugh? I know can you say whether you're aimed at one or the other?
I think there's an in between or a balance where I would say I'm more aimed at getting feedback.
Okay.
So obviously I want to laugh. And during the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of online shows or Zoom shows, and sometimes that can really suck because sometimes what I feel like is it almost feels more like a writer's room where I'm
Yeah.
just like, hey guys, what do you think about this one? And it's not fun because there is no laugh. Because you can't really, because like
Yeah.
the way,
Right.
Zoom or whatever does their sound mixing just kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And so there's an in between there. I like to tell what I like to tell, but if
Mhm.
nobody's laughing, that's not fun to tell. So it's both,
Okay.
But it is nice once you find that one person in the crowd that you can tell loves it.
Mm.
Just start looking at them the whole time, and then the rest of the show's fun no matter what. Like
Yeah.
I've had shows like that for sure. Where one time I did a show in Paris, Texas, and it felt like that where I had like it was a room of maybe 60, 70 people, and I had two people just loving it, and the rest were not getting it.
Yeah.
And it was a blast because I ended that, talked to those two people who came up to me, sold them both a shirt from my merch, and I
Nice.
was like, this is better than if 70 people, thought I was average,
Yeah.
in my opinion. So,
And those two people will look for you, right? They'll try and find you again. They'll try and get some more laughs out of you.
they'll be
Tell
the
their
ones who
friends.
seek out my Instagram, or in the best of scenarios, seek out my Patreon or
Yeah.
something, And
Yeah.
so I, yeah, the fact I literally maybe have 4 people that give to my Patreon that I just met through shows. And those are the most impactful, supporters,
Yes.
because I literally don't know them. Maybe
Yeah.
I met them once after a show, and they said, not only am I glad I sat there for 20 minutes that night, I want to give you $3 a month or whatever. That's
Yeah.
just mind blowing to think that that could happen. And you only get that if you're true to yourself,
Mm.
not to be too, Disney about it. But if you are doing what you want to do, if you're being generic, people can see that. And you might, I don't know. Yeah, it depends. And you can tell when people are starting out if what they think is expected. And you've got every comedian, I don't know if you noticed this, almost every comedian on their first or second album has a bit about how men and women are different. Right? I mean, you could go to any comedian and there's at least 5 to 10 minutes of like, men do this, but women do this, or the very close relative of that, in my opinion, which is, I hate dogs or I hate cats, and then 5 minutes on why they hate dogs or cats. And almost every comedian has like 5 to 10 minutes on that,
Wow.
because you realize like, oh, that's what is universal. But then hopefully by their third or fourth album, they're a little bit more who they are, or they can do those things in a unique way, for sure. Like, I think Pete Holmes, who's I would say my favorite comedian, his I hate dogs joke on his second album, I think it's phenomenal. But at the same, but now that I go back and I listen to it, and I'm like, yeah, you can tell he's kind of doing that, because you kind of need to do that when you're on the road until you have like the you audience.
Yeah.
And so many comedians that are even professional, that are, a couple levels above me, they're doing clubs where they're not a name. The club just has a reputation enough within the town that people will come see whatever comedian's at the club.
Yeah.
So the club has to maintain their identity as a good club for whatever medium-sized city they're in. And the comedian doesn't necessarily get to be them. They have to be the club's representative on some
Oh
level.
yeah.
So there's just so many different layers where it's like, you've got to give them what they want and what you want. And it's I think that's where some of the craft comes in, is to figure out how to make you accessible while still being you.
Yeah. Man, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, man, I can the thing about comedians, I don't know a ton. I mean, I know you and a couple others, but it's so sad to me to think that you guys would have to give up any part of you. Like, I have to go and do this now. I have to be like this, because it's like, man, you work so hard and you put yourself out there, and you have to kind of fit a cookie cutter mold for a night, or for this time or whatever. Or writers, I can only imagine people on shows who are like, this guy keeps dropping all my best lines. I work so hard for this, and it's not. I mean, it's about the money. You want to eat food, but it's like, this is who I am. I'm the funny guy, and my stuff's really good. And these idiots just they want a laugh track. It
Totally.
hurts me to think through that, because I'm like, I can imagine what that would be like.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, but if they're going to pay me to write jokes, I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's better than being a barista or whatever, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
like being a barista too at times, but
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
So, well, every now and then I catch one of your Facebook updates, and you're like, yeah, I met this dude, or I served this dude, or whatever. What are you doing right now?
well, I was working at a coffee shop part-time before the pandemic.
Mhm.
That coffee shop furloughed the whole staff,
Dang.
and then brought only half the staff back, and then I wasn't part of that, based on just like who was working the most hours, essentially.
Mhm.
And then I went on unemployment for a little bit. Then I've been I work in a different coffee shop since
Okay.
September. So
Is that why
yeah, but
you
that
see a lot
one's
of
in like
people?
a pretty rich neighborhood, which is why I've been like,
Okay.
man, I just served Michael Keaton,
Yeah.
and he was chill. Michael Keaton, the week before Christmas, dropped a 20 in the tip jar, and he just leaned over the counter and he was like, "Merry Christmas, guys!" And it was crazy. It was
Yeah.
so fun,
Dang.
and especially with masks on, when I can see a famous person, I'm definitely like, whoa. I'm like almost proud of myself too, because I'm like, I knew that was Michael Keaton from his eyes,
Yeah.
you know. You know?
Yeah. He'd be a famous one with those famous eyes from Batman and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, no, he's got some good eyes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there are times, and then, but also, as with any hopefully fine dining experience, we're not really allowed to,
Right.
acknowledge their fame. Yeah.
Yeah, you
So
gotta slip him your plaid headshot into his pocket or into his.
yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal. I mean, some of the more fun kind of LA famous person interactions I've had have been not at work too, or like one time I was in line for an ice cream shop and I met James Gunn. Um, and he was literally next to me in line, and he was like the director of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mhm.
And most people don't know what he looks like, which is nice for him, but I did, and I was just psyched that he was there, and we talked for a little bit, and that was like one of the most fun interactions I've had with a celebrity, just because he was super chill, and nobody else could even tell he was famous except for me, which was
Oh
kind of fun
yeah.
to feel like I was like, hey, I know who you are. Um, and then I made a video about it. I don't know if you saw. I made a video
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that
yeah.
back in July, and
Mhm.
he shared it on his
Oh
Instagram
wow, I didn't
story,
know.
on Instagram, and that was just the coolest thing for him to kind of like acknowledge, like, "Hey, I remember that too." But
That's
yeah,
awesome. I remember that video. I
yeah,
didn't know he shared. That's great.
yeah, yeah,
Um, well, dude, I wanted to get into like the struggles of clean comedy. Do you call it? Would you consider yourself a clean comedian?
yeah, for sure. I don't market myself that way because I feel
Sure.
like that places a box that it can be super helpful, and I know clean comedians that do market themselves that way that I super
I just
respect.
doxed you then? Did I just like ruin your career just now by
No,
saying that?
no,
We have to cut this.
yeah, I'm done. This is it. This is my last
Great.
interview.
Yeah.
No, I think um I'm clean just because that is usually where my mind goes. I
Okay.
rarely think of a non-clean joke to begin with. I'm not really censoring myself. But also do, want to maintain cleanliness you know, for the ability to have that kind of slightly broader appeal, or like I wouldn't really want to perform in a church, but I feel like I could.
Okay.
And I've got Christian comedian friends who are like Christian comedians, and that is their thing. And
Yeah.
a couple of them I think are hilarious, and they do it great. I mean, and uh, I'm clean more just because that's who I am as a person. So I don't really think it's that much harder. I think every
Okay.
now and then, and I've made jokes about this before too, but every now and then people will be like, "Oh, is it hard to be, a comedian in this like political correct culture?"
Hmm.
And I always am just like, I don't feel like people who ask me that, I'm always like, I don't feel like you know me that well, because what did you think I was going to try to say?
Yeah.
Like, what aspect of political correctness do you think is weighing me down? Because I've never once been like, can't do that because it's politically incorrect. I don't know. That always just cracks me. I'm like, what did you think I was trying to say
Yeah.
that I can't say now?
Yeah.
Um, because I think, and maybe I'm in a unique place within that discussion where I think a lot of the comedian cancel culture, first of all, it's not true cancel culture because most of those comedians are still performing and making a living.
Yeah.
So they've just fallen back on their 10,000 fans. They just no longer have the 100,000 fans, and that's the difference. But they're still full time. Um, I don't know if I don't know how to say it, but it's like if I feel too scared to make a joke degrading women, I think that's a win, not
Hmm.
a not a cancel, in my opinion. Like if
Yeah.
that's how the culture is going, and people no longer feel like they can, make um, jokes at the expense of gay people, that's purely just a joke about somebody being gay. I to me, I'm not against that thing, because it's just at that point, if anything, it's just capitalism at play of people saying, I don't want to support you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, right, right. I thought about that too when I saw like Bill Burr, his special after Chappelle's big one. It was like, oh man, this cancel culture thing is great for you. Like this is the best thing to ever happen to your comedy. And it was like you can kind of see behind the screen. I'm not saying he's not authentic or anything like that, but it's like that plays into his style of comedy perfectly. Like that was great for him. Whereas you're the I forgot how you said it, but I in my head you're like the constructive. I'm just thinking like there's constructive and
Destructive.
deconstructive, destructive. Yeah, yeah, destructive
Yeah, yeah.
comedy. Where that one's just dumping on people, and I think that's funny. That's probably more who I am. I'd probably have to censor myself because I'm just kind of a jerk naturally. Like my wife is the only one who knows my true humor, and it's terrible. but I'm still in process here. But
Well, I've got those moments for sure. And
yeah.
like there are times where if you're with the right people, or like there are times where I do shows alongside comedians where I do have that kind of relationship,
Hmm.
and it's fun to go up after them and you can kind of rip on them, and I
Yeah,
feel totally comfortable doing that.
that's good.
That's yeah, I'm definitely into that at times for sure. But I definitely agree. Yeah, the term that I try to like center a lot of it around is like the idea of being earnest.
Hmm.
And so it's like I think tearing down or destructing can be super beneficial to society,
For sure.
but not without also hopefully providing some morsel of hope, not optimism, but like constructive hope.
Yeah.
So I think that's to me that's the big difference. I love the idea of like earnestness and cynicism. That's something I've written about a lot and journaled about a lot, just because to me that's a big thing where any art that feels cynical turns me off. And so I would say, there are
Mm.
some comedians that are cynical, but then you have people like Chappelle. He doesn't feel cynical, even though he is often destructive, because he is still seeming to hope for a better society,
Man, that's
even
good.
as he's critiquing.
Yeah.
And I think that you can just tell that vibe is totally different. And like, there's some comedians though that like Bill Burr interviews are my favorite part of Bill Burr,
Yes.
because he is
Yeah.
just incredibly irreverent, and I'm just like, man, he looks like he feels invincible,
Hmm.
and he's just ripping on the interviewer. This
Yeah. Or the
person's
chair.
going out of their way. Yeah, the
Yeah.
chair thing. Oh
That
my
was so
gosh, the
good.
chair thing is
Love
such
the
a
chair.
good.
Yeah.
That's a great interview. And that irreverence is fun.
Hmm.
And I remember the first time I saw that, just being like, man, he looks like he just feels invincible.
Hmm.
But also, I don't know if I want my invincibility to come out of apathy, which often it does feel like that for Bill.
Yeah.
And I've never met him or anything. And yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
no shade to Bill Burr by any means. But
For sure.
if your invincibility comes from apathy, I just hope that personally, I would want to strive for a higher ideal than apathy
Yeah.
for what fuels me.
And that's so cool to hear you talk about the hope aspect and stuff, because man, maybe you're more plugged into this than me, but I don't feel like we have poets today, right? So sorry for anyone
Mm.
who's a poet out there. Let me know, send me your stuff, come on my podcast, that'd be great. But the comedians have taken over a larger role than they used to have. I would say they're the poets. They comment on religion and people
For the
listen to
prophets,
them. Yeah, yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah,
totally agree. No, I agree.
and all these different functions have fallen into that, and maybe that's a bad part of our culture. Maybe we're not willing to like read a article anymore. But when I hear so I work with campus ministry, and when people talk about challenges to their faith, it's coming a lot of times from the comedians, because it's short and quick. They're really good with their presentation,
Yeah,
and they're really
they're
intuitive.
rhetoricians at the end of the
Yes.
day, in
Yeah.
a lot of that for sure.
Yeah. And so it seems like comedians have just taken on this a more important role in our society, and so it's cool to hear that you actually are intentional about that. You want to breed hope.
Yeah, I think yeah, no, I love that for sure. I think I want to breed hope. When I perform live, especially again, and that's why the Zoom shows can be so tough, because you don't get a lot of this in
Yeah.
there, is that to me, I view my comedy as hospitality. That's
Mm.
what I really try to go for. It's like I host a monthly show in LA during before the pandemic, and super fun show, have bigger names on the show, but I get to host it, right? And there's a decently big audience most months, but the hosting is what I love the most, because I get to set the vibe, and I get to in my mind, it's the task of making every person in that room feel like they were supposed to be there and wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the truly deep kind of philosophical or even kind of mystical, spiritual component of comedy, is you feel like you're part of a community, but what community am I bringing them on the journey of?
Mm.
Am I bringing them on a journey of hate? Because that's the easiest emotion to get a crowd on your side, to say we all hate them.
Yeah.
Or am I saying, hey, let's look at all the crazy, wonderful things of the world, or just like the weird, wacky things of the world, and point out that let's personify a hot dog. Let's do these things together and bring you along in that. I think it's a harder task. And I also think it's often a better one, but sometimes you can't build up until you tear down. So I'm also not afraid of tearing down if that's necessary.
Yeah.
I do try to give political or social commentary at times if it feels appropriate, for sure. I try to do, even in my wacky jokes, my general format that I've tried to curate is like a silly premise, a silly punchline, but then a social punchline, and try to like do all three of those. Like I have a joke where I in Southern California, it lands better because of In-N-Out, but In-N-Out?
Yeah.
And like, so like their special sauce is essentially Thousand Island, and that's pretty much what it is. It's Thousand Island with onions, but people are just like, oh, and so I have a joke where I'm like, I'm pretty sure when people say they like In-N-Out, what they really mean is they like Thousand Island dressing. And then I say, that's like saying, you like toast when you really just like Nutella. So that's like my silly punchline off of a silly premise. But then I say, or it's like saying I like Bernie Sanders, but you really just like feeling morally superior. So it's like then more of like a social joke, right? And I'm not even anti-Bernie. I think he's got some great stuff. But there's a level where it's like fun to like let that be the final stage in the progression of the wackiness of the joke. Yeah. And if you let society be the final escalation of the stupidity of your joke, I also think there's a fun meta narrative within that of saying that society is pretty wacky too.
Yes. Yeah. That's another thing we could add too, right? We talked about religion, but politics, that's huge. That's probably the biggest one. The biggest
especially these days.
Seriously. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It was interesting. I forgot who I was listening to, but they were talking about how Trump was initially really good for comedy and then kind of messed with it because everyone was doing Trump jokes. And it was like, yeah, it's kind of easy. We all kind of expect that. And then like, what do we do? What do we come up with now? Because the president's usually gold. Like that's usually who you go after, the sitting president. I don't know if they did that.
Trump jokes for the most part feel pretty hacky unless you've got a really unique premise on it, right? Okay. So like it felt like everybody was doing Trump jokes, and then there was a lull for a while because everybody was doing Trump jokes, and then every now and then you have like a really, really what feels like a sophisticated Trump joke, like the John Mulaney horse in the hospital bit. That was the first Trump joke after like a 2-year lull, in my opinion, when that came out in like, what was that, 2018? I think when that joke came out on his last special, and it was just everybody was like, oh, we can do Trump jokes again, but it's got to be clever. It can't just be Trump said something stupid because that's just the news. Right. And so how are you going to make it clever? That's where the joke is. And that's where a lot of political comedy can feel lazy. And I think to me, that's where I love Colbert over Fallon. Or two is like Colbert goes out of his way to be political, but to be clever about it. And I feel like Fallon avoids both for the most part. Right. Or now I feel like the image that just is so crazy is like when Trump was on Fallon during the election cycle in 2016, there's just a great, stupid, funny photo now of Fallon literally petting Trump's hair. Yeah. And especially given the last couple of weeks, I don't know, it's just crazy to be like, man, that used to be our society. Yeah, right. And now we're here.
Yeah, dude. Oh my goodness. That's crazy to think about. Yeah. Well, I wanted to finish up with some Ocean Spray stuff. So anyone who knows you, I have to bring this up because they know who you are. But can you explain what's up with you and Ocean Spray?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fun running joke for probably 5 or 6 years now. I think 6 years ago, I started making fake kind of ads for Ocean Spray. It started because I do truly love their juice. I literally got a couple boxes of their juice right now in my room, and I do drink it most days, and I have drank it most days since I was in 5th grade. That is all true. The social media presence that I give definitely exaggerates it into somewhat of an idol worship of the juice to me in a funny comedic way. I do some stand-up that is cranberry juice centric. If I do a long set, I like to end my set with a little poem / song that I wrote, talking about poetry not existing anymore. Cranberry poetry. And a song called Why Cranberry Juice Inspires Me, and it's just stupid and mentions UTIs a lot. But then a couple years ago, I started trying to in my fake materials for them, essentially ask them to make me their commercial spokesperson. Yeah. And Progressive has flow. I want to be that for Ocean Spray. I've been saying that for years. Last fall in September, I made a video a rap music video,
Super
a
good.
comedic rap. I'm by no means a rapper, but I think if I can be funny enough, people don't care about that.
Yeah.
And that's the goal, at least. And so super fun to make. Actually kind of got on their radar for a minute. We had interacted before, but never officially. It was always like, hey, thanks for making free marketing for us. But then there was finally a meeting that I had with them about, hey, do you like, can I make something for you and get paid for it? And I think they were finally warming up to that idea. But then the dog face video came out of him skateboarding. Literally, I'm working on making a video of me explaining what happened, as well as, and you'd be the first person I've told, other than my friends, that I'm also working on a follow-up rap, but it's gonna be more like a breakup song. Like, it's still a joke, but more in that vibe.
Yeah.
And so trying to like just ride this out. I keep asking myself, am I burning bridges? And then I'm like, I don't think I have any bridges to burn. If anything, I'm just like announcing to the world that there's no more bridges.
Yeah.
And so, but the Ocean Spray dog face stuff started happening with the Fleetwood Mac song and all that. And the week that I had the marketing meeting with them to talk about making content for their channels.
Man.
Because to me, I don't want to be an influencer. I mean, to me, there's a big difference there. I don't really want to be an influencer, which to me means Ocean Spray putting content on my channels. Right. I want to be a creative producer putting my content on their channels.
Yeah.
Right. To me, that's a difference there. Because I don't think I have enough followers to be an influencer, but I do think I have creativity that I can sell.
Yeah.
And that's how I've been trying to approach it. And so, yeah, it gets messy because the night of the marketing meeting was when they gave him a truck and they put it everywhere on social media. And then that night I was inundated with text, like just 40 to 50 people probably were like, did you see they gave him a truck?
Yeah.
And I responded to everybody and I said, yes, I saw that they gave him a truck. I'm a little bummed for sure. So then I went onto Instagram, and just on an Instagram story, to preempt all the texts and messages I was getting, I said, hey guys, yeah, I saw they gave him a truck. And yeah, it's a bit of a bummer that they've never given me a truck, but I am happy for them. And I went out of my way to really try to tell my followers that I was happy for them, because he's clearly moving a lot of product for them. Like, there were pictures from around the country of Ocean Spray shelves in grocery stores empty because people were trying to recreate the video.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, I am happy for them. And that's why they gave him a truck. There's no argument there. But I put on my video just like, yeah, like I drive a 2007 Pontiac Vibe with 200,000 miles. Could I use a new car? Absolutely. Right. So I was just making kind of self-deprecating jokes, in my opinion.
Right.
They didn't like that. And I now look back and feel like they probably were just looking for an excuse to end the conversations with me because Dogface took off with them. But at least what they told me was, they told me that my Instagram stories, which I didn't even know they were watching, were too negative and they didn't want to work with me anymore. And I was just really surprised, because I'm like, I go out of my way to not be negative, as we literally just discussed like the last 30 minutes. It's like, I try to be the comedian who actually gives hope. And yet they saw me as this negative voice. And again, I think that was an excuse. I think it's how I've processed it since then. That day was rough because I was like, man, I felt this close. I was like, man, this would be, such a fun conclusion to this weird, wacky journey I've been on. And then feeling like, oh, had I done something to screw that up, was really tough on me for a minute. And then finally just kind of had to process it, go on a long bike ride and say, you know what? They misunderstood me. They were probably looking for a reason to cut me.
Yeah.
No reason to be legitimately hurt. But at the same time, now there is a new freedom to that, where now I'm going to make a breakup song because I no longer feel like there's a chance for me to get paid by them. So I'm just going to kind of say, screw it, and make a stupid song. And if they get upset about it and I'm too negative, what's the worst that could happen?
Right. Man, it's so weird what people like. Like, I mean, you put out creative content. I forgot about Ocean Spray until we became Facebook friends all those years back. And now it's like, I don't think of any other cranberry juice because of you, but I didn't even think about it.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. You make like your Instagram, you have like really professional looking shots of like Ocean Spray, like on the beach or wherever you're hiking or whatever. And it's hilarious. And it is actually like kind of advertisement, which is weird because I'm like, oh, do I want ocean spray now? Dang it. I just want to have the funny stuff. I don't want him to actually be in my mind. But then some dude like Dogface, and for those who don't know, you gotta know, everyone knows this. He made a TikTok video where he's skateboarding and he kind of like looks up, he's like all sleepy looking, and he like looks up at the camera and then he keeps skateboarding. And everyone was just indoors, stuck in the pandemic or whatever, and for some reason it just caught on. And it's like, I don't
He blew
get
up like
that.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
that I remember when the day it came out, I had a lot of people send it to me on TikTok, and I was like, no way, crazy. And then for 2 more weeks, it kept blowing up and getting put onto different platforms, and now it's blowing up on Instagram, and now it's blowing up on Facebook, and it just kept expanding. And I was like, man, he does have a vibe. I mean, he's a fun guy. You can just tell he's living life and cashing happy checks, and that's super fun.
Right.
And that is fun to just watch that. But it's also like, man, he wasn't trying. The main punchline to me that I've thought of when trying to figure out how to do this is like, man, he beat me at a game that literally only I was playing. Like, he wasn't even trying to play the game, and he beat me.
Dude. Right. It's crazy. So for me, I have my own frustration is my frog video, which has like 37 million.
Video.
And it's like, dude, I wasn't trying. I don't even know why I put it up. I just was like, I have these frogs. It's a hobby, whatever. Make a quick little video of them. I got bad comments. People were like, I'm gonna put you in there. I'm gonna kill you. Blah blah. So I turned off the things. Went to Puerto Rico for a year. Came back, 1,000,000 views. Now it's got 37 million views. And I'm trying to like capitalize. Man. It's nuts. And I get paid from that from like a third party source. Not nearly as much as if I just went with YouTube. But I'm like, now I'm working so hard. I read people send me their books. I read the whole book and then I have them on to the podcast and we talk. It's like hours and hours of work, 100 views. And it's like, great. This is cool. The internet's so weird. I don't know what
people
you guys
don't
want.
like it when you care, but they also do. And it's a weird tug and pull there, or a tug and push, because it's just like, yeah, you have to care.
Mm-hmm. We
get penalized for caring if it's obvious we care.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to build a brand about caring, not in like a real kid way of like, oh, we care for each other, but just like being earnest. Like, if you have something you like or desire, I think it's beautiful to go after it. I think, I'm the type of friend, hopefully, that if a friend tells me they want to do something, I'm going to take that to mean that we're going to work together for you to do that thing. Like, that's the type of person I want to be. So I'm going to try to help other people be that. And then yet there is always this like weird punk rock aspect, and I love punk rock, so I'm not even anti this, and I get why it's appealing, but it's also like, for us to talk about it feels a little like we're trying too hard, and it's like, where did that come from? Because everybody wants things, and that annoys me. I mean, I think that aspect of LA and the stand-up scene in LA is really big, and that's something that one of the reasons why I really love the improv scene is because they don't have that. But even within stand-up, if you tell people, hey, I want to be a talk show host, right, that's my end goal, biggest dream ever, is replace Colbert when he retires. That's the most exact goal I can give myself,
for sure. And
for me to tell other stand-ups that, they often, you can tell they are like, oh, well, one day you'll learn that's stupid. And they view me as naive for having a goal, and I hate that. And I never want to be that type of person to someone else. I do want to be realistic, and I'm glad when people give me realistic feedback and constructive feedback, but to completely tell me, well, one day you won't be so naive, I never want to be that.
I appreciate that, man. That's good. There's some of that in every community, or at least everyone I'm in, where it's like, dude, I want to have a goal. I want to work towards something. I'm not saying it's all or nothing. I'm not gonna destroy my life over this, but I'm gonna go towards a goal, or I don't feel like I'm making any progress anyways. Dude, so I wanted to finish up with hearing from you where we can find you, but I always wanted to tell you my favorite thing I think you've ever put out, and I hope this is encouraging and not like, dang, I worked so hard on other stuff. There's this there was this Instagram video you put out when TikTok first came out, and you're at like a art institute, or you're in somewhere with a bunch of paintings, and you're like you're like pretending to be a kid, and you're like, Mom, I don't get art. Like, why do I have to be here? What is art anyways? Like, why can't I just go back on TikTok? And just whatever, the way you said it, I watched it like 400 times. It was
No way.
so funny. And I went back because Instagram, I had to go find it again. So I went back thinking, I'm like, I just need to hear that again. And then at the end of the video, the kid who you're playing is like, well, what is this, like a boat? Like it doesn't know where it's going. Well, like I'm kind of on a journey myself. What? And then he's like crying and he gets art at the end.
Dude, I'm so psyched you love that. No, that's at the Getty in LA, which is like the big art museum on
Okay.
the hill in LA. But it's just that was a fun video to make because I was there and I was that kid, honestly, right? Like I was the kid when I was in middle school. I was like playing Pokemon when we went to
Right.
museums or whatever,
Yeah.
And so that is sort of my journey. But also, I love that you love that. That's so
So
funny,
good.
man.
I'm gonna watch it again later today. Actually, maybe
Dude,
I'll leave another comment.
that makes me psyched because that was just like I was at my sister had visited LA and we went to that museum and I was like, hey, you want to make something with me? And so she was the one filming that, but that was so fun.
That's awesome. Well, so I'm gonna go find that on your Instagram again. But where can people find you? Like give me all your plugs so people can find your stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my plugs are hopefully fairly easy, but it's all the same. So it's every social media is at Kassebaum. So my last name is Kassebaum, so just a pun on that. So it's instead of Ebom in the German way, it's Thebomb. So I'm at Kassebaum on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and then my Patreon. There's links to that in all of those bios, and then what would be the last one? And then Facebook, I think I'm Kassebaum on Facebook too. Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I mean, between Instagram and Facebook, I cross post, so there's nothing unique there, but the other platforms have unique stuff.
Yeah. So will you have your stand up on YouTube? Some of it?
I have clips. I don't have like a full special or anything, but I have clips on. Actually, I don't have them on YouTube. I've got clips just because the real good clips, for the most part, were I was sending out to festivals and submissions and stuff, and I guess I could put clips. I think because of the pandemic, I am trying to figure out how to create essentially the opportunity to retire old jokes that I haven't performed now for like 10 months anyway, but also like when I get back into it, I don't really want to do old jokes again.
Sure.
So I have some stuff on YouTube for sure and Vimeo because some festivals only take Vimeo submissions for some reason. And then I should probably put more on YouTube now that I think about it, just because I'm probably not going to do those jokes anymore anyway. Because for so long you have this idea of I'll wait to put this out when it's like a special.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's like I don't know what's the difference between a special and like a 20-minute clip from a show I did in San Diego. What's the difference?
Well, now with my huge subscribers who actually do like they're all gonna be just inundating you, man. It's gonna be great.
Dude, I can't wait for the Parker Pensie's peak or what were you?
Yeah, that's what we'll call it. That'd be great. Well, dude, thanks so much for coming on, man. This has been really fun. I'd love to do it again. I'd love to have you on, talk more comedians, talk your stuff, your influencers, hear some more of your stuff. That'd be awesome.
Dude, I'd love that. This was a blast. You're crushing it, and it's super fun to see you do this. And just a quick nostalgia to like our blog buddies. Remember?
Yeah,
those
blog
days?
buddies, man.
That was, I think, how I met you, right?
Yeah.
For the first time, and so
River City Roasters.
At River City Roasters in Wheaton, Illinois, we'd meet with a couple other friends and like write and talk about what we're writing, and you'd be writing like theology, philosophy stuff, and Tony'd be writing book reviews, and I'd be writing jokes. So those were good days.
Yeah, Chris was doing whatever, man. Like
Star Wars stuff, right?
I actually just had him on, so you'll probably air right after. Yeah, man. So we're talking about the Sith, and then we end up getting the Old Testament because he can't help but talk about the Old Testament, which is good. It's a really dark episode, so yeah.
He's who I still text him all the time when I need clarification on something Star Wars. I'm just like, hey,
man,
this is my understanding. What's your understanding?
Yeah. I love that, man. It's so good. All right, well, I'll put all the good links in the description here. So if you guys are listening, go check the links. You can find them. I'll help you out there. Dude, Jared, this has been awesome. Can't wait to do it again with you.
Yeah, love you a lot, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I love you too, bro. Okay, this has been Parker's Pensies, and as always, all glory to God.